What's up, everybody? It is your favorite theory crafter Skizzors here, bringing you a brand new Nexus by the numbers, presented by stormlegacy.com. Today we're going to be going over the new hero, who is a ranged assassin, and that is Kel'Thuzad. Let's get right into it. Kel'Thuzad is a very interesting ranged assassin, first of all because of his trait, Master of the Cold Dark, which is a quest, and that is gain 1 blight every time a hero is rooted by Frost Nova or hit by chains of Kel'Thuzad. The first reward is after gaining 15 blight. The cooldown of all basic abilities is reduced by 2 seconds, and the second reward is after gaining 30 blight, gain 75% spell power. Now, what most people don't know is Kel'Thuzad actually has lower scaling per level than all the other heroes, so standardly it is 4%. I believe it's 4%. And Kel'Thuzad gets 2.5% per level for stat scaling. So he starts off a little bit weaker than most heroes as you're gaining your levels and your power spikes, but if you can hit that 30 blight, you gain a very large spike in damage, which equals out to about a standard mage assassin. Most squishy assassins you can blow up in a one-hit combo. But typically you'll be just outputting a lot of damage, a lot of control. Kel'Thuzad's first basic ability is Death and Decay. Mana cost is 20, cooldown is 6 seconds. After 0.5 seconds, launch an orb that explodes upon hitting an enemy. Deal X damage to the enemy in the area. The explosion leaves behind a pool of decay that lasts 2 seconds, dealing X damage every 0.5 seconds to the enemy. So it's a straight line skill shot, as you can see. When it hits a target, the skill shot explodes on the area and then drops a circle around it. Pretty straightforward. It's really good for wave clearing and also good to get that extra bit of damage, and surprisingly a pretty strong nuke when trying to pick off somebody, and the projectile is pretty quick. So you should be able to catch most fleeing enemy heroes if they are within range. Up next we have Frost Nova. Mana cost is 45, cooldown is 10 seconds. Create a Nova that explodes after 1 second, dealing X damage to enemies inside and slowing them by 35% for 2.5 seconds. Enemies in the center are rooted for 1 second. So once again, another pretty straightforward spell as far as understanding how it works. The inside circle will root targets if they're inside of that, and the outside circle will just damage and slow them. So as you can see here, if I hit them on the outside, you can see the slowing effect, and if you hit him on the inside, there's the rooting effect. The last basic ability we have here is Kel'Thuzad's bread and butter ability, which is Chains of Kel'Thuzad. Mana cost is 45, cooldown 12 seconds. Launch a chain dealing X damage to the first hero or structure hit. For 4 seconds after hitting an enemy, chains can be reactivated to launch to an additional enemy, pulling both enemies together and stunning them for 0.5 seconds. It should also mention that the second chain can latch onto structures as well, not just the first chain that you shoot. So I'm going to bring up some clips right now of different examples of Chains of Kel'Thuzad, where you're going to hit an enemy, the chains are going to wrap around, and then from there you can cast Chains of Kel'Thuzad again, and then connect to either an enemy or a structure, pulling them together and stunning them. So to show that off in try mode, I'm just going to hit the dummy so you can see the skill shot line. So they're actually the same as your Q. This is your Q, it's a little bit longer. Chains is a little bit shorter. So they're the same width. So with chains, when you throw it onto an enemy, chains pop up, and then from there you can launch once again and hit a different target. So let's get into Kel'Thuzad's talents, and just as a reminder, I'm not saying this is the only way to play the hero. This is the way I find to be most optimal and efficient in playing the hero, but I'm not saying this is the only way to play the hero. If you have other ideas, you're always free to do that. This is just a guide to get you guys in the right mindset with the hero and thinking of different possibilities. So level 1, there's 2 options I tend to go for, and that's Blighted Frost and Barbed Chains. So we're going to go over Blighted Frost first, and that's Frost Nova deals 50% more damage to enemies in the center. After gaining 30 blight, increase Frost Nova's root duration by 0.5 seconds. This tends to be my go-to as a general standard approach, but I'll explain when to choose this over Barbed Chains next. So with Barbed Chains, you increase Chains of Kel'Thuzad's damage by 125%. After gaining 30 blight, Chains Kel'Thuzad reduces the armor of pulled heroes by 15 for 4 seconds. So in trying to figure out which level 1 talent to pick, I typically go with the idea of can my team do mass follow-up damage on the chain targets? Now what I mean by that is, do you have dive heroes? Do you have large nuking heroes? What do you have that will enable the armor reduction to really fully succeed in securing kills? So for example, I don't choose barbed chains for myself because you're basically going to use your full combo and maybe get 1 to 2 extra damage ticks of the reduced armor. Where this comes in handy more is setting this up for your team to deal the damage with the -15 armor. So it really depends on what heroes you have on your team to combo well into this. Lately I've been going Blighted Frost because it provides me a little more utility for myself, and the root duration increase also helps your allies get to the target. They just don't have the reduced armor. Blighted Frost also helps a lot more with clearing waves, although Kel'Thuzad doesn't have any problems clearing waves with or without Blighted Frost. It does help to just kind of streamline that process a little more. And you also end up using Frost Nova a lot more than you use Chains of Kel'Thuzad. Chains of Kel'Thuzad is the ability that sets up a kill, but as far as spamming in a team fight, you end up spamming Frost Nova a lot, where Chains you still want to kind of wait for the proper target and the proper combination of hits to streamline into the stun and the pulling of the heroes. So like I said, typically I pick Blighted Frost, but if you have an organized team, or if you can combo really well into the chains combo, etc., things like that, then barbed chains is definitely going to be a great pick as well. So level 4 we have some situational talents, and then one that's kind of a general talent to pick. So the situational ones are Strip Shields and Armor of the Archlich. So Strip Shields is pulling a hero with Chains of Kel'Thuzad, grants Kel'Thuzad a permanent 246 shield. That's 246 being a level 20, so an X number shield, stacking up to 2 times. Additionally, Chains of Kel'Thuzad deals up to X bonus damage to shields. So if you're fighting Zarya, Artanis, any hero that's gonna get a shield, basically, Tassadar, for instance, is a good example. Strip Shields is definitely something really good to go for. It does make Kel'Thuzad a little bit tankier, as well as allowing you to take out shielded targets a lot easier, or at least reducing the amount of shield that they get. That's really the only situation you're going to want to pick this up in, so it's very niche, but it is the pick in the situation with shields. Armor of the Archlich is activate to gain 50 physical armor for 4 seconds. Upon activation, nearby enemies take X damage and are slowed by 35% for 4 seconds. It's got a decent AoE. I'll just show it off real quick for the size of the AoE. I didn't mean to just click it straight up. But this is the AoE for it. It's pretty big, and you really want to grab this if you're against a large stack of physical damage heroes, so Vala, Butcher, Raynor, heroes that are going to be dealing more physical damage than anything else, and the enemy team has that as their main source of damage output. Armor of the Archlich is really good for that situation. The level 4 talent I typically go for, though, is Phylactery of Kel'Thuzad, and that's a quest talent, and that is collect 10 regen orbs or globes to charge Kel'Thuzad's Phylactery. Kel'Thuzad's Phylactery can be activated while dead to immediately respawn at the Hall of Storms, must be charged again. The passive you get for this is Kel'Thuzad heals for 10% of all spell damage dealt while the Phylactery is charged. So what makes this a really good talent is, one, you have a instant respawn if you need to use it, which is obviously really nice to have. 10 regen orbs or globes is not that difficult to collect, and it's pretty straightforward as far as how the quest and reward system works. The part that's very good, though, is the passive that you gain for it while it's fully charged, which makes you not really want to use it unless you're in a dire situation that it would need to be used in. So the 10% of all spell damage dealt is healed, or heals you, ends up adding up really quickly. This works on minions, this works on heroes, whatever it may be. So with Death and Decay, if you hit a minion wave with Death and Decay and then a Frost Nova, you're going to heal for a pretty good amount. If you want to heal for more than just clearing the wave, you can just Death and Decay twice. It gives you a lot of healing, and that also helps in team fights to make you a little bit more sustainable and also gives you an insta spawn if you need it. So at level 7, I really only ever pick one talent. I think it's the best one to pick out of all of them, and that is Glacial Spike. So the cooldown is 30 seconds, it's an active ability. Activate to create a spike that detonates after 4 seconds, dealing X damage to nearby enemies. The spike can be affected by Chains of Kel'Thuzad. So what Glacial Spike gives you is a free point at which you can combo Chains of Kel'Thuzad without relying on enemy players to be around the area. So how Glacial Spike works is you have an area in which you can cast it. It also has some other uses I'll show in a second, but it has an area in which you can cast it. You spawn it in, it pops up, and it has a duration that it lasts, and then explodes afterwards. So with Chains of Kel'Thuzad, if you're chasing somebody, so say this person's running away and you're running after them, and I'll show some footage while I'm talking about this talent, but you can spawn the chain the chain, and then pull the target, or chain the ice spike, and then pull the target. So that's one use of it. The other use is to use it as something to cut off pathing or body blocking, and it's kind of, I don't know if it's an intended feature, but I found this to be the case in a few of my games where this has a hitbox, so you actually can't walk around this very easily, where you have to, you know, like it's hard to walk around that thing a little bit. You have to kind of go on the outskirts here where it's kind of animated and cracked. That's a hitbox. So if you were to cut somebody off as a path, you have this extra ability where, say somebody's running, you're trying to cut them off, you can drop this in an area, we'll just say right there, and it forces a target to go all the way around it, which means the retreat could be a little longer for them, lets your team catch up. And the also nice part about that is if you drop something like this and they start to walk around it, you can chain off of that. So Glacial Spike gives you a lot more utility than just creating a spike that does damage that you can combo off of. It also provides you with a body blocking utility tool, and that works both offensively and defensively. If you're being chased and somebody's behind you, you can drop it, and it gives you just a quick second to continue to walk over. You can drop it right directly on you, but once the spike is up, then it pushes you away from it. So just a cool kind of utility trick. If you need to run, you can drop it where you're at. They can't walk through that, they have to walk around it. You can use it as a body blocking tool, or you can use it as a combo piece to pull in a target. At level 10 we have 2 ulti choices. Both have their use, but one in particular I end up using just about 100% of the time over the others. So the first heroic is Frost Blast. Mana cost is 70, cooldown is 100 seconds. Launch a meteor of ice at an enemy hero. Upon impact, the meteor deals X damage to its target, and then a bigger X damage to enemies in the area. All enemies hit by Frost Blast are rooted for 1.5 seconds. So this is pretty strong, it's really good AoE damage. It's kind of the easier ulti to pick between the two. There's not as much you have to do with this one, just cast it and let it go, as shown here. It's got a very, very long cast range, and you drop it on an enemy, creates this ice ball, slowly moves, gets faster, blows up, roots everybody in that area. It does increase with speed, as it gets closer to the target, or the length it travels. So if I cast it here, you'll see it slowly speeds up until it hits the target. The other heroic ultimate choice, which is the one that I recommend picking as of right now, as of the making of this guide, is Shadow Fissure. Mana cost is 50, cooldown is 15 seconds. Create a fissure anywhere on the battleground that explodes after 1.5 seconds, dealing a massive X damage to enemy heroes in its area. So if you've played Chromie before, this is basically Chromie's W. Alright, this is her dragon that flies up in the air and lands. That's essentially how you treat Shadow Fissure. With the cooldown only being 15 seconds, it's pretty spammable, and since it's global, you can help your team out wherever they are at. So I'm going to be showing some examples of that on the footage that will be popping up on the screen, hitting some global abilities. I hit a Jaina really far away, and also I use it to combo in other scenarios that'll kind of be popping up on screen here. But Shadow Fissure has a pretty small AoE range, and players typically have more than enough time to get out before it lands. As you can see in the clips that are on screen right now. You can really force enemies to walk into it by dropping it in front of them as your team's chasing them, so they don't really have a lot of options as far as escape tools. They either have to walk into it or they have to go back into your enemy team. So it's a good area denial tool and can guarantee some pretty heavy hitting damage. 13, you have some pretty good talent choices. I tend to go for one specifically because it helps with comboing, and that is Chains of Ice. After Chains of Kel'Thuzad's stun expires, the enemy is also slowed by 70%. With this, it's really hard to get away from you, which means it's a lot easier to land your Frost Nova route after your Chains of Kel'Thuzad's stun is over. It takes Frost Nova 1 second to explode, and they're slowed for 1.25 seconds, so if you cast Frost Nova immediately after the stun duration is over, you're going to hit them in the center, you're going to get that big damage, you're going to get that root, and it's just more and more CC for your team to capitalize on. So at level 16, there are two choices that I've been going back and forth between. One in particular, I tend to pick more than the other, but I'm going to be going over the less picked one first. So that's Power of the Ice Crown, and stunning, rooting, or slowing a hero grants 6% spell power for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Now this sounds really powerful, and it is. It's very, very strong. Mathematically speaking, it's the best one to pick at 16. The problem I have with it is your Chains of Kel'Thuzad can proc it 1 time, and your Frost Nova can proc it 1 time, which means you're getting 12%. Now, you're going to be able to cast Frost Nova again before the 10 seconds is up, with Master of the Cold Dark being finished on its first tier, reward being at 15, reducing cooldowns of the basic abilities, which means Frost Nova is 8 seconds, so you can hit another Frost Nova and regain the full duration for Power of the Ice Crown to continue stacking and allowing you to become more powerful. The issue with this, and this is kind of the stipulation and kind of what you have to think about while you're in the game, whether or not Power of the Ice Crown is your pickup or not, is it takes a long time to get full value out of this. So your abilities, you have, assuming that Master of the Cold Dark is done, you have an 8-second cooldown and a 10-second cooldown that can proc this, okay? And with an 8 and a 10-second cooldown, it's going to take you, 30 seconds plus to kind of really see a lot of value that comes out of this. Stacking up to 30% isn't necessarily something that's going to happen all the time. The other thing to note, though, is if you hit multiple enemies with Frost Nova, this power spikes really quickly, but if you only hit one target, it's a slow power spike. So it's kind of up to you whether you're going to make that call or not. By 16, I pretty much know how the enemy team's playing, so if I'm kind of as a standard, if I'm hitting just one hero with Frost Nova, they're not grouping up all the time, I'm not getting any chances to really get multiple hits with Frost Nova, then Power of the Ice Crown isn't necessarily worth it for me because it's going to take me a while to get up to that power spike. Where if they're grouping a lot, maybe they have a Lost Vikings, they have more, more enemies on the field. But they are like the big one is if they are grouping a lot. So if the enemy team is grouping, then Power of the Ice Crown could be really good because if you hit, a 3-man Frost Nova and then hit another one with Chains of Kel'Thuzad, that's going to get you to that, the stack limit pretty quickly there. To get value out of this, though, you do need to be landing your abilities, and if you miss, you pretty much lose them. So you just got to make sure you're continuing the upkeep of Power of the Ice Crown every single time you're going into a fight. The other thing that can combo into this really well is if at level 10 you got Frost Blast. So you lose out on the global damage and you lose out on some huge damage at 20, but Frost Blast will add stacks to Power of the Ice Crown, which will give you more and more combo potential. So to me, this is, technically speaking, it's the best level 16 talent that you can go, but it is hard to maintain an upkeep on it where it is actually a reasonable pickup. So just keep that in mind when picking up the talent, and it could do you wonders or it could do you nothing. The other level 16 talent that you can pick up is Hungering Cold, and that's enemies rooted by Frost Nova take an additional X damage each time they are damaged by Kel'Thuzad during the next 4 seconds. So that's auto attacks, that's abilities, that's everything. This damage can stack up really quickly, and it also is applied to all enemies hit. So this can be a really powerful tool. It's not nearly as hard as an upkeep of Power of the Ice Crown, so I recommend going either one of those. Like I said, typically if by 16, if I'm seeing that they're grouping a lot, Power of the Ice Crown is definitely going to give you massive value and allow you to continuously output a lot of damage per each of your spells. But if you don't see them grouping that much and you grab Hungering Cold, if you do happen to hit a big group, you're still going to get a lot of value out of this anyway. And at level 20 we have all good options pretty much. So Death Chill is the heroic upgrade for Frostblast, and that is when Frostblast's root expires. Enemies are slowed by 40% for 3 seconds. If a hero is killed while under the effects of Frostblast, instantly release another Frostblast explosion. So with this, if you have a lot of nuke heroes and you can chain and work together to blow up one hero in particular and then move to the next target, very like surgically hitting, you'll be able to have a constant explosion of Frostblast, rooting the enemy, slowing the enemy, and it ends up being a very large CC tool for your team. The next heroic upgrade is Might of the Scourge. Hitting a hero with Shadow Fissure resets its cooldown. This is a huge, and I mean like massively huge, damage spike you get. I'm going to bring up some examples of me using this, and as you're going to be seeing from the clips here, you can just output so much damage if you can chain the cooldown reset on this thing. It power spikes KT to a whole new level, and you're able to just constantly put pressure on the enemy team. You're constantly being able to drop these abilities wherever you need to, and if tanks are willing to stand in them and they're going to give you free hits, then by all means, let them stand in the giant circle that blows up. So definitely a good option. It's my favorite as far as just getting raw damage out of KT, but there are some other good options to pick from as well. The Shifting Malice is kind of interesting. The cooldown is 240 seconds. Activate to dash forward, dealing X damage to enemies in his path. Takedowns reset the cooldown of Shifting Malice. So you can use this kind of as a bait and switch kiting tool. You can also use it as a nuke if somebody's close to you. You can also use it as a gap closer. So there's a lot of interesting uses for Shifting Malice. I think its utility is really strong. It's, however, really hard to pass up your heroic upgrade for Shadow Fissure. But if you do pick up Shifting Malice, I'll show you how that works real quick. So you have a very small dash that you do. The width is a good size, and like it says, a takedown will reset its cooldown. So you can kind of think of this as Genji's E ability, where you fly really far, and you hit somebody, and if they die within 2 seconds, then the cooldown gets reset and you can continue to use your E to bounce around the map. Shifting Malice kind of works in that regard. It is a good escape tool. It does go pretty quickly. So those are things to kind of, look at. So if you were chasing somebody down and they were out of range where you couldn't use your glacial spike in the Chains of Kel'Thuzad, so if maybe you're like down here, right, and you're like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to reach them, you could Malice out, chain like that. Your other option is maybe they're about to die and you're pretty close to them and all your abilities are on cooldown. You can just go through them and hit them, get a reset. You can also do the bait and switch like I was talking about, where maybe this hero's coming up on you, so you're gonna be like, trying to hit them and then jump back, freeze. There's a lot of different options as far as Shifting Malice goes, and it's probably my favorite in the skill tree. Like right here, if I were to bait, Arthas, I can bounce back, hit chains, and continue to kind of do some different bait tools, try to get them to come back towards me. There's some potential. Obviously my toggle cooldowns are on, so I'm able to use this over and over and over again. But you kind of get the idea of using it as engage, as a chase, as a escape, as just another damage ability that you can drop in. And since takedowns reset the cooldown, if you are attacking a target and they're pretty low, and you use this and then maybe drop your Q and it kills them, this will be off cooldown again, so you're able to dash more if needed. The last level 20 upgrade is the Damned Return, cooldown 15 seconds. Activate to create a shade of naxxramas that lasts 15 seconds and mimics Kel'Thuzad's cast of Death and Decay. It's a cool ability. I don't really see that much utility in it. You can probably perform some pretty cool snipes with it, but that's really about it as far as the utility I can see. It's good for wave clear. It's got its uses, don't get me wrong, it's a good pickup, but the other ones just provide more to me, so that in a sense kind of makes the damned return not as good. I'm going to show you what it's like real quick, but Might of the Scourge and Shifting Malice are my favorites. MOTS definitely provides you a lot more damage. Shifting Malice gives you a lot more crafty utility that you can do, as well as a little bit of damage. And so, you know, pick and choose what you want to play with. So the damned return, pretty good size range of cast. Pop them up. Little skeleton dude sits there, and you can see that he casts your Q with you, and they do stack damage. So the damage does stack pretty well. So he's got his uses, but not exactly my favorite level 20 pick, but definitely a cool ability. With that, guys, that's going to conclude this guide of Kel'Thuzad. I hope it was helpful to you guys. I hope you kind of learned some new things, some different utility that you can do with the hero, and all around help improve your gameplay overall. If the guide was enjoyable for you guys, I would really appreciate a share or a like, comment, whatever you guys want to do. Any comments is always appreciated, and just you know, let me know what you thought of the guide. I hope it was enjoyable, I hope it was insightful, and I hope it improves your Kel'Thuzad play out there in the matchmaking world. So once again, guys, this has been Nexus by the Numbers, presented by stormlegacy.com. Hope you enjoyed the guide, and this has been your favorite theory crafter, Skizzors, and we'll see you next time.